Hello, Canucks fans. Welcome back to another episode of Canucks Conversation, brought to you by Bet365. My name is Dave Widrelli. I am joined by Harmon Dial. Monday edition of Canucks Convo. I've been saying this a lot lately. We've got some stuff to talk about, but we're still waiting on that Vancouver Canucks trade. The first one to come down. It is draft week. We're going to have a lot to touch on this week. The big news of the day is Trevor Zegras. That's the trade that we're going to be talking about and kind of dissecting from a Canucks perspective, as we so often do on this show. But we're going to start in Abbotsford, because over the weekend, the Abbotsford Canucks lost Game 5. I'll just start with this because I know Jacob's going to make me tell the story anyway. Our technical producer, Jacob Azar, does a great job. I knew it was a 6 o'clock start. I knew that, okay? Let me just preface by saying that. I knew that. But then my Saturday got a little bit busy, and for some reason, at some point in the day, people can relate to this, I know. At some point in the day, something switched in my head, and I just immediately started thinking, 7 o'clock, I got to be there for 7. So I was like, okay, I'm going to leave for Abbotsford by 5:15, and I'll be early. That was my plan. I'll leave 5:15, 5:30. I'll be really early for the game. And then I get a text from Chris Faber about 10 minutes before 6 o'clock. He's like, hey, I'm just outside. Let me know when you're here. I'm like, I'm still about 30 minutes away. He goes, it's a 6 o'clock start. And I knew that. As soon as he texted me that, I knew it. I knew it was a 6 o'clock start. So long story short, I get to Abbotsford Center, and I'm not sure if you heard, Harmon, but that building was packed, as was all of the parking lots and all of the surrounding areas that you could even imagine parking your car. So I did a couple laps around Abbotsford Center. Eventually, I just crossed the highway again. I went over to the north side of the highway. I parked on some random residential street, and then I just took an Uber. I was like, I'm biting the bullet. I can't find parking. And even like, they were really capitalizing on that parking. I'm sorry, but if you're making me walk 2 kilometers and there's no actual sidewalk, I'm walking on farmland here, you cannot charge me $15 for parking. And that was what it was. It was like all the way down, way down. They were charging for parking. It was outrageous. So anyway, this is my roundabout way of saying I got there.
Anytime you start a story with, well, I knew it was a 6 o'clock start, but it's going off the rails.
Yeah. Scott Spitters in the chat said, park at the Cabela's. The lady in the elevator, bless her heart, she was super kind. I was telling her about this story. It was a long elevator ride. And she said, you should have parked at the Cabela's. I didn't know there was a Cabela's in Abbotsford. Like, if you told me, go to Cabela's, I'd think only to Austin Mills. I didn't know there was an Abbotsford Cabela's. Let me see where this is. Maybe
it's like right across the highway. You can't miss it.
Yeah, but I parked closer than this. What are people talking about? Oh, no, I didn't. Oh, that would have been a great option. Damn it. Okay. Anyways, okay. Regardless, I figured it out. I was at the game, and we got to talk about it. Our opening segment today is brought to you by our friends over at Greta. By now, Greta's a great spot to watch the big game, but did you know it's an even better spot for your upcoming party or event? If you need a venue for a team building or summer social event, check out Greta. They've got the street food menu, they've got the arcade games, and of course, they've got the bar. Plenty of options. Always a great time at Greta. Make it your spot for your next event. For more info and to book your event, go to gretabar.com. Greta Bar, YVR, 50 West Cordova Street is the address. Let the games begin. Okay, so a 1-0 start to this game with Charlotte going up ahead really early. There was a 2-man advantage after that where Linus Karlsson, like we've talked about it, there's guys who just look so good at the AHL level. We've had this conversation about Sweet Wheels Nils Amon back in the day. He's not on this team anymore, but Linus Karlsson just looks so much better than everyone else. Unfortunately for the Canucks, and again, this is going to be a conversation about the whole game. Unfortunately for the Canucks, beyond that first line of Karlsson, Baines, and Sasson, really didn't get much. It was a really weird time for Sammy Blais to have one of his quietest games of the playoffs. You were looking for him to kind of get going, get you into the fight. And the thing I've learned about this Abbotsford team is that when they're at their best, they are, and I know it sounds so cliche, but when they're at their best, they are forechecking hard. They're doing that stacking of shifts. And remember, I think we count on one hand how many times the Vancouver Canucks stacked shifts on their opponent with a heavy forecheck this year, and how every time we got very excited and we were like, oh my gosh, this is great. That is Abbotsford's identity. That is what they do when they are playing at their best. And unlike the Vancouver Canucks, they do it often. They didn't do it for all of that game. And unfortunately, that came back to bite them a little bit. And Manny Malhotra post-game, we're not going to play the audio, but he was, and you can understand a bit with how this game ended, and we'll get there in a second, but he seemed a little bit dejected in the sense of like, yeah, it was an unfortunate ending for the team, but there was no reason that game had to go to overtime. They allowed that game to go to overtime, is the feeling that I got. And again, that's kind of what I gathered from how Manny sounded and what he was talking about when he spoke about that game afterwards. But just going through the timeline events here, like I said, 2-man advantage, Abbotsford scores, Linus Karlsson on the power play. That game is tied. Second period starts. I arrive at this point. Okay, I was listening to the game on the radio for the first period as I tried to find parking. Excuse me. Charlotte scores the next goal of the game, 2-on-1. The teams go 4-on-4. Now, this was the really interesting one for me because a thing you heard post-game was mistakes. Abbotsford made mistakes. Charlotte made mistakes. For some reason, the Checkers at 4-on-4, their defensemen were pinching on everything. Okay, this led to a breakaway for Baines. He buried it, ties things up. They're back at 4-on-4 because, like I said, it was 4-on-4. So right back at 4-on-4, it was another bad pinch on the very next shift. Like it wasn't even like later in the game. It was the next shift. A really bad pinch from the Checkers defenseman leads to Linus Karlsson going in, scoring on the go-ahead goal. I don't think I'd ever seen 2 goals like that in rapid succession where it was just like, what are you doing? You can see this from a mile away. And again, the 2 guys you don't want to give that opportunity to on this Abbotsford team, Arch Baines and Linus Karlsson. So he scores the go-ahead goal. It's now 3-2 Abby. Absolute mayhem. Like you heard a lot about that atmosphere at Abbotsford Center. That was the epitome of it, if you ask me. These guys were fired up after that goal, and the Baines goal got the building super loud. And then, like I said, for the Karlsson one to come not long after, I was just watching and I was like, oh my gosh, like Linus Karlsson's, you might as well change that 4 on the back of his jersey to a 9 with the way this dude plays at the AHL level. My goodness, like he's so good at the AHL level. It's actually ridiculous. Even the play, again, the Charlotte guy pinches, but it's also Linus Karlsson putting it through his wickets and going the other way. Like there's skill on the creation of that goal as well.
Yeah, even his original power play goal, not just him, but that whole line with Sasson and Baines. I loved the fact that Baines, when he got the puck down low from Wolanin, he jammed it and actually went for the shot on net, as opposed to, as a playmaker, one of the, I don't want to say weaknesses, but flaws of Baines' game sometimes can be that he's too pass first and he doesn't take opportunities to shoot the puck when he should. A spot like that earlier in the playoffs, I don't know if Baines would have had the just instinctual confidence to jam the puck towards the net. I wonder if he would have instead looked for that backdoor play where the pass was already sort of cut off to Karlsson. So him having the confidence from having all the success this series to immediately throw it at Kakinen's pads, create that rebound, that goal doesn't happen without that sharp decision by Baines in a spot where when you get the puck down low and there's pressure on you, you don't have a lot of time. It's a split-second decision. So for him to make the right read there, that leads to Karlsson's first goal. And even just throughout that game, I mean, it was really interesting because for so long we've talked about the depth of Abbey, how they're a 4-line team. This was one of the odd games where it felt like Abbey was kind of a 1-line team, where that one line was so dynamic, was so electric, as they have been recently for much of the series. But the rest of the team, as you alluded to earlier, wasn't really able to find its rhythm as consistently. But that's where, when you look at how deep Abbey is on paper and how many guys have stepped up throughout the playoffs, I look at it more as a positive and say to myself, looking ahead at game 6 and 7, I'm confident that the Blay line will step up. I'm confident that you'll get contributions from the Mueller line, from the 4th line, because they've done it all playoffs long. And this just kind of happened to be an off night. And especially when you have the Karlsson Baines line going as dynamically as it has been right now, if they can keep this up, or even 80% of what they've been doing lately up, and you get the contributions from the rest of the lines that you've been really getting for most of the playoffs, I don't see why Abbotsford shouldn't be able to close this one out, even as the series shifts back to North Carolina.
Yeah, Harm, you're exactly right. all playoffs, we talked about how this was a team of depth. We were tracking all the different players who scored goals for Abbotsford, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 different guys. And you're right. Now the top guys have stepped up, and they've stepped up in a huge way. But I think, if you think back to early in this series, back to game 1, those goal scorers were Sasson, Nate Smith, Ty Mueller, and then Klimovich in double overtime. So the whole Carlson Baines carrying play has kind of been a more recent has been more recent in this series. The depth is going to be more important going back to North Carolina. We know all about that horrible ice. Brandon Astle was on the show saying, how he had to wipe his forehead off and wanted to take his dress shirt off and wear it like a headband, right? I think that as Harmon said, it's going to benefit the Canucks to have that depth, and we know Charlotte has that as well. But if Baines and Carlson go out and combine for 2 points here tonight, I like Abbotsford's chances because I think you're going to see some of these depth guys on the bad ice, slower, pucks are going to be bouncing around. You're going to be able to capitalize on maybe a bad turnover, a player falling over, some kind of net front scramble, and you'll see a guy like Ty Mueller or Chase Waters pot a garbage, greasy goal, and that might be the difference if Baines and Carlson can still keep doing what they're doing.
The only worry you might have is if the Baines Carlson line, they've been so dangerous off the rush, and Abby's benefited from having cleaner breakouts at the Abbotsford Center. You just hope the ice isn't so bad that it takes away from that line's ability to generate off the rush and in transition, because that's where they've been doing the bulk of their damage. But I'm with you, Jacob, especially with them having 2 opportunities to close it out. Obviously, you don't want to delay it to game 7, but having the second bullet in the chamber is really valuable. And this has been a resilient group all year long. So the confidence level has to be relatively high, even though they dropped game 5.
There was a quote that really stood out post-game from Manny Malhotra, and I was saving it because I wanted to go over how the game ended. We'll get there in a second. But it was talking about the disappointment of not closing it out on home ice and that they have to go to Charlotte. And he said, that there's no secret. That was our storybook ending, but we're not a storybook team. And that really stuck with me. Look, man, I was a Manny Malhotra fan the second he came on our show. And just hearing that dude talk, that is a good motivator. That is a solid coach. And I've said this for a while. My general take on coaching of professional athletes is that there are very few who can really positively influence a team where it's like, okay, if that guy becomes available, we got to go get him. But there's a lot more that can kind of derail a team's vibe, if that makes sense. And I've said this for a while now, that I think really you just need a coach who's not going to disrupt things and isn't going to take away from your guys' natural abilities and take away from what your team can do. And I think that's most coaches. But there are very few who are like, okay, I'm going to take over this team and get way more out of them than anyone else could. I'm starting to think Manny Malhotra might be in that conversation. And I mean, he's certainly done exactly that this year with this Abbotsford Canucks team. And I wanted to make sure I mentioned that. I'm a big Manny Malhotra fan, but I want to continue on with this game here. This was really the point that it turned. And if you recall, we were somewhere in the second period. Yeah. Okay. I got my handwritten notes in case anyone's wondering, like I did the day I discovered Elias Pettersson before anyone else. I mean, people on this show know I knew about DPD before anyone else knew about him. So controversial call with 9:08 to go in the second period. At this point, it was all Abbotsford suffocating Charlotte. And remember, there was the 2 goals. There was the Carlson goal and the Baines goal that gave Abbotsford the lead. And then after that, like, it was mayhem in Abbotsford Center. They were stacking shifts. They were on top of their game. They were playing so well. And then there was a missed call, in my opinion, and no one on Abbotsford's obviously going to rip the refs after a game like that. But there was a missed call in the neutral zone. I think it was Jonathan Lekkerimäki. Lekkerimäki's getting ready to reload in the neutral zone, which is their play. Like, they do that all the time. That is how they transition the puck. He's reloading in the neutral zone, and the Charlotte guy just jumps in his way. Like, it wasn't an incidental contact. It was, no, I'm going to get caught flat-footed. I'm going to interfere with you. Textbook interference, if you ask me, goes uncalled. And at that point, I was like, okay, that's fine, because to that point, the refs were letting the boys play. Like, there was a real element of that. Like, playoff hockey, whistles are going to get put away a little bit. There's a higher standard. Sure, no problem. Then, like a minute later is the thing that really drove this home for me and really not pissed me off, but the thing I looked at and said this is an injustice was the net front battle with, I think it was Ty Mueller that ended up getting called. Jacob, do you remember? It was Ty Mueller that got the call against him for a simple net front battle because the guy went down. Like, what
Yeah,
are we
I think
doing?
it was Mueller.
I guess we don't have the replay, but anyways, it was a net front battle. Like, it was a net front battle that happens 100 times a game. The guy falls down. Yeah, that's going to happen sometimes. And Mueller gets hauled off to the box in a game where the officials weren't calling a lot and certainly missed a call, I think, on Lekkerimäki, or against Lekkerimäki, you know what I'm saying? And then they bring Mueller to the box. Charlotte scores 3-3. This game's 3-3 with 7:48 to go in the in the second period. And then after that, Charlotte came out in the third and had the ice tilted. Now, there's no excuse for the Canucks after that, but I just thought it was worth mentioning that the officials sucked the life out of the building, if you ask me, and they sucked the life out of that Abbotsford team. Not an excuse for Abbotsford not getting the job done. Certainly, I know no player on the team wants to hear me making excuses for them, and no coach on that team wants me to be making excuses right now. There is no excuse. They came out super flat-footed in the third. Charlotte was all over them, had the ice tilted. Archer Shilov's made some massive saves, especially one that stuck out to me was with 6:50 to go. Made a huge save on a 2-on-1, and I was really impressed with Archer Shilov's, but I was not impressed with the guys in front of him. I thought, like I said, that first line was like the only one that came to play in that entire game. But even like Victor Mancini looked so average in that game. Sammy Blais, and again, not to rip Mancini of all guys, but it's just like you wanted more from so many different guys on that team. You could go up and down the lineup. I feel bad picking Mancini's name out, but I do have in my notes here that I thought Mancini just looked a little bit average.
I mean, he also did have the moment where he fell.
Pretty big gap.
Skating back, which directly led to one of Charlotte's goals. So you're right. It was
the 2-1 goal.
Yeah, and the only reason we can say, oh, he only looked average is because we have such high expectations for Mancini.
Yeah,
it's because we know how talented he is and the potential he can play out and how dominant he's been earlier in the postseason. So that goes. The same thing goes for the rest of this Abbotsford lineup. Is they've never been a top heavy roster. They've been a do it by committee. And now that they finally have one line sort of dominating at an elite level that they really haven't had for most of the postseason, you just hope that everybody else can bounce back. And again, I'm confident that they will.
You need everything to click. You need Archer Shilov's to bring his A game. This game goes to overtime. I'm waiting to go on the ice. I'm ready to go. If the Calder Cup was presented, we were heading onto that ice. So this game goes to overtime. And that's where Abbotsford came to play. Like you had the sense that Abbotsford was going to win this game because, my goodness, for as awful as their third period was, their best period of the game was overtime. They were stacking shifts. They were all over Charlotte. You were just like, okay, like these guys want to get it done. And obviously they wanted to get it done, right? And then this happened. And we have the overtime clip. And I apologize to those in the podcast, but I'm sure you've seen it. Puck behind the net. Jesse Puljujarvi, remember him, centers the puck in front. It goes off Ty Mueller's skate, and then Guillaume Brisebois reacts and tries to kick at it with his skate, and he kicks it directly past Archer Shilov's into the back of the net, and this one comes to an end. An absolutely stunned Abbotsford center reacting to that one. That was, that is the unluckiest goal against I think I've ever seen at any level of hockey. Like Tykes, whatever you want to say, Adam. That is the worst. That is like that's like the two worst consecutive bounces I've ever seen in a game of hockey, any level.
It's such a fluky bad bounce, but if you remember this year's NHL playoffs, how many OT winners were there where it's guys throwing a puck and it bounces in off a skate or redirects in a really fortunate way and beats the goaltender? This year's NHL playoffs was like, whoa, there are a lot of fluky bounces in high leverage, high stakes moments that are winning or losing teams' games. And unfortunately, this one went against Abbotsford.
Yeah, so they didn't get it done. And that sucks. That really sucks. That you could tell the vibe. And look, I report the facts, man. I report the facts. The vibes were not good after the game. They were not good after the game. A lot of players' families came out for that one. But I will say this. I think the vibe quickly shifted because and look, Chase Waters, one of the greatest guys I think in the game of hockey. We always hear about, okay, I'm going to quickly lose track. I'm trying to retell a joke, but there's a joke that someone from Abbotsford told me that works for the Abbostford Canucks and was like, yeah, like Chase Waters just shows up at a children's hospital just in case the team needs him to go visit kids. Like Chase Waters is one of the best captains of any level of hockey, and I just wanted to say that for sure. But the thing that I'm saying is, I think the vibe shifted a bit, and I think it started with Chase Waters, because after the game, like, you would think, oh, maybe, bummed out a little bit. He's like talking to fans, and the fans were like wishing him good luck and all this stuff. And he was in a good mood. Like he was like, spirits were high. He's talking to fans. He's stopping for photos. He's doing autographs, all that stuff. Like, I really, really, like, I have a lot of respect for Chase Waters. We've already established this, but I think that vibe might've shifted. It was bad right after the game. Like, players were coming out and it was like, it was tough. It was tough. But what also stood out to me was Christian Wolanin came out post game and like didn't really want to answer questions about the game, and not really in a I'm going to be an ass kind of way, more in like a that sucked and that's my answer to that. Like, he didn't want to talk about it. He said, like, yeah, that sucked, but all we can do is move forward and we're ready. Like, I really like that attitude from Christian Wolanin. And like I said, friend of the show, Christian Wolanin wasn't doing it in like oh, that bummed me out and I can't believe I have to come do media. He was like, that sucked and there's nothing we can do about it to change it, and we're going to move forward. And I really like that attitude from Christian Wolanin. And yeah, all the Abbotsford fans in the chat saying Chase is the best. It is not news to anyone that Chase Waters is a great dude. So yeah. Anything else on Abbotsford that you wanted to say? They play tonight. Obviously, we've kind of alluded to that a couple times. 4 p.m. Pacific start in Charlotte. Canucks, of course, have another chance to close it out and win the Calder Cup.
No, just wanted to say that great teams don't get rattled when things go against them, because once you gain enough experience as a team, you understand that to have success in the playoffs, you're going to be put in tough, uncomfortable spots when something devastating happens for your team or it feels like you're down and out. I mean, you just trace back the Panthers' path to winning this Stanley Cup. How many games there were or moments there were when it felt like things were, maybe going against them. The Leafs series being the most prominent example, down 2-0 in that series and down multiple goals in game 3. It would have been really easy to think, all right, you're down and out, this is kind of over. And yet you just maintain that level of composure. You don't get rattled, you don't panic, and you're able to bounce back in a moment like that. And Panthers, same thing. When they originally made their first Stanley Cup appearance, the year they lost to Vegas, down 3-1 to the Boston Bruins, everybody thought they were finished, and yet they found that resilience. They didn't hang their heads and think, oh, our season's over against the President's Trophy champs. They battled back and found a way. And what you observed about how quickly they were able to reset and kind of process it is, of course, in the immediate aftermath, it's devastating, but to quickly move on from it as quickly as you can and try and maintain as positive an attitude as you're able to do, that's really important. And the way to reframe it is always ask any Abbey player, would you have liked a 3-2 series lead heading into game 6? You take that all day long. So as devastating as this was, I like, when you're observing things like Waters and Wolanin having this sort of mindset and already kind of processing it and moving on, I take that as a positive sign.
Love it. House of positivity, baby. I did also want to say Brandon Astle was on with Halford and Bruff this morning, and I heard him talking about what a positive morning skate it was and how the team's in high spirits. And again, like when I say, oh, the vibes were bad, I'm talking like as the players were leaving the ice, it was bad. So yeah, of course it's going to be bad. But before I even left Abbotsford Center, things shifted. Like I said, I brought up Wolanin, I brought up Chase Waters as well. I don't know, man. It's you brought up the fact that it's great teams who can do this, and I think the Abbotsford Canucks are a special team for sure. I don't want to go out and be like, oh, great team. They're a really solid team. I think this team's special as well. So we will see. We will see what happens. Game 6 and potentially Game 7 Wednesday. Just get it done. Let's get the trades going. get some stuff started here. I don't want any more. I don't want to see a game 7. I really don't. But get it done game 6, boys. Even though I don't get to go on the ice for this one, I'll forgive you. Get it done. Game 6. All right. Anything else on Abby? Either of you? Jacob?
I'm good.
Okay.
Nope, I'm good as well.
Let's do it. Let's get to our poll question. It is about something that happened in the world of the NHL today, and it is brought to you by our friends at Pacific Toyota Dealers, who want to tell you about the 100% electric Toyota BZ4X. An SUV packed with plenty of space, the BZ4X can handle any terrain and can take you from the city to the slopes. It's backed by the peace of mind that comes with knowing you're driving a Toyota, and if you're driving a BZ4X, you get access to HOV lanes even if you're driving alone. When you choose the BZ4X, you can get a $5,000 incentive, and now you can finance a 2025 BZ4X LE all-wheel drive from 0.99% APR for 36 months. Visit shoptoyota.ca or your local Pacific Toyota dealer today. All right. Excuse me. Jeez. Okay. Trevor Zegras traded today from the Anaheim Ducks to the Philadelphia Flyers. The return, Ryan Poehling, who's a bottom 6 center, more like a 4th line center, traded for the 45th overall pick, which of course is a 2nd round pick, and a 4th round pick as well. So I think the immediate reaction is that it wasn't a huge cost to get Trevor Zegras away from Anaheim. What did you think of this trade?
I liked it for Philadelphia. There's, of course, no guarantee that Zegras thrives as a top 6 player next season. The last couple of years have been challenging and difficult for him. But I like this as a low-risk, high-upside move where you're betting on the player's talent. And really, what did you give up? You gave up a 2nd-round pick and a bottom 6 center. Most 2nd-round picks don't even make the NHL. And this is a player that we're not talking about maybe has the potential to be a top 6 player. We're talking about he's already done it twice, where as a 20-year-old rookie, he scored 61 points. As a 21-year-old sophomore, he scored 65 points. The proof of concept is already there. It's about, can he tap back into that form? And for me, it's just rare to see a player put up 60-plus points in back-to-back years at that young of an age and not figure it out as a top 6 player consistently over their prime. I take these last 2 years, and I think it's a combination of him just dealing with injuries, obviously, part of which hampered his foot speed. I also think it was just straight up a poor fit for him with Greg Cronin. So many of the Ducks' young forwards stalled under Cronin offensively. Carlson didn't take a big step. Zegras obviously didn't take a step. McTavish didn't take a step this past season. I think Cronin sapped Zegras's offensive creativity to some degree, and he had Zegras so focused on the defensive side of the game that he was almost playing too safe. Like the way some fans will talk about, oh, Rick Tocchet is robbing Pedersen of the way of.
That's actually Greg Cronin.
That's actually Greg Cronin with Trevor Zegras, in my opinion, anyway. And so when I look at the scoring profile and even just the talent, like watching him as a prospect coming up and his early NHL career skill set, the playmaking vision, and how well he sees the ice, and not just putting up the point totals as well the first 2 years, but doing it mostly driving a line by himself. He didn't have star line mates to play with. He spent a lot of time playing with Sonny Milano, where it was clear that, okay, Zegras is the straw that's stirring the drink. And to do it as well in a team that wasn't producing a lot, I'm just a believer in his skill set. I'm a believer in his talent. And I think with a fresh start, better health, and a new coach, I expect him to be closer to the 60-point player that he was earlier in his career. And I like the fact that Philadelphia didn't have to pay a lot.
And I like this for Philadelphia for a couple reasons. You just said it as well. They didn't have to pay a lot in the trade. Where they will have to pay is if you're right about Zegras and he has this phenomenal bounce back. He becomes a top 6 center. He's an RFA after this season, and he is going to get paid if he bounces back and has that kind of production again, becomes the player that we've seen him be in the past in his career. So I really like the trade for Philadelphia. I don't necessarily not like it for Anaheim. I'm not looking at this and saying, oh, I think the Ducks could have gotten more. I think this is the trade market right now. This is the trade market that we're dealing with right now. And there's some people in the chat wondering about what this means for a potential Marco Rossi trade with the Canucks. And that's an interesting kind of topic to discuss. And we're going to talk about that later as well. But I did want to kind of keep focus on this Zegras deal. I really like it. I don't really like it for Anaheim, I suppose, but I don't hate it for Anaheim. I think it's a fair deal for both sides. Jacob, you said you had something to add here.
Yeah, I'm just going to back up some of what Harm said with some numbers. So, mentioning that Greg Cronin really was changing the way that Zegras was playing. If you look at Zegras' NHL Edge data, the change from his first 2 seasons to his last 2 seasons, which the last 2 were under Greg Cronin, huge difference in his skating distance, in his speed burst, in his shot numbers. It's very clear that this is a player who was being coached to not skate as much, not be as creative with the puck, not shoot as much as he was in his first 2 seasons, which were under Dallas Eakins. So, like, players don't just magically become different players overnight. Injuries might play a part in it, sure, but when you look specifically at his edge data and how much it has changed after his rookie and sophomore year compared to his final 2 years in Anaheim, I think a fresh start somewhere else. And you can say what you want about Rick Tocchet, but Rick Tocchet is not Greg Cronin. And I think that if Zegras is given the opportunity to be creative, to move around the ice the way that he used to, I think you'll see a bit of a bounce back in his point production.
Yeah, definitely agree. And this isn't to say it's a guarantee that Zegras is going to recapture his early career form. And there are still a couple of question marks. He still isn't the best player defensively. And he's awful on faceoffs, right? He's about a 41% career faceoff guy. So he needs to prove that to stick as a centerman. And I think he's much better and more dynamic and dangerous as a playmaker playing down the middle than he is on the wing. So like that is an area that either he's going to have to improve on faceoffs, or you need to find a winger that can sort of take draws for him. So that's, a potential obstacle for sure. But overall, I see the upside, and I don't think Philly had to give up a lot. People, of course, mentioned the red flags in terms of character concerns. Is he too much of a hot dog? Can you win with him? I'm not going to say that those concerns are necessarily wrong, but that's baked into why he was so cheap to acquire. And when you look at the PL Dubois acquisition in Washington, everybody was calling PLD a quitter, this and that, not just fans and media from the outside. I'm talking execs too. You ask about PL Dubois, and some of the things that these execs would say, especially ones from former teams he was on, was just like, wow, I've almost never heard an exec rip a player like this before in terms of like the work ethic and this and that. Mm-hmm. And yet, ask the Washington Capitals how they feel. They ended up getting him for practically nothing. And that's the key, right? Is this is the kind of trade where if it hits, and again, no guarantee that it does hit, but if it does, that's going to look like a steal for the Philadelphia Flyers in terms of what you gave up for him, especially when you consider how hard it is to find top 6 centers. That could end up being a lopsided win where you get disproportionate gains relative to what you gave up. That's the kind of trade the Canucks sort of need to find, where you don't give up a lot, but the player that you receive ends up becoming way better than maybe people around the league figured it was going to be. So people point out the red flags and the character and this and that. That's part of the reason. But yes, that's a risk factor, but that's also that can work in your favor because it means a player like Zegras goes for cheaper than he probably should based off his talent alone.
Okay, so you kind of alluded to it. Let's see what the people think. Our poll question we just asked, now that you know what it cost, a second, a 4th round pick, and Ryan Poehling, would you have wanted the Canucks to trade for Trevor Zegras? 51% of voters say yes, 49% say no. Now, a comparable package for the Canucks, I saw some people throwing up Teddy Bluger. I don't think that's necessarily wrong, but like I looked more immediately, I thought of Drew O'Connor as being a more fair comparable to Ryan Poehling in terms of what it would take in this trade package. We're not going to disagree and spend time talking about if it should be Bluger or O'Connor. That tier of player is what we're talking about, okay? Now that you know what it cost, a second, a 4th, and let's say it would cost Teddy Bluger, for argument's sake, okay? Should the Canucks have traded for Trevor Zegras? What do you think, Harm?
I lean towards yes. Again, acquisition cost wasn't high, and the Canucks don't have a lot of assets. Look, I love the idea of going after a proven higher end top 6 name like a JJ Peterka and Alex Tuck, if you think you can sign him to an extension, although in that case, it sounds based on, I think it was Elliot Friedman's reporting that the Sabres aren't even entertaining moving Tuck at this point anyway. But the larger point is, yeah, there are sort of, names like Peterka that you can look at and go, that's more of like a clear check mark. And wow, that guy's almost like a guaranteed fit. Whereas with a player like Zegras, there's more risk. But the key difference is for a player like Peterka, the cost is going to be astronomical. And the position the Canucks are in right now, where they don't necessarily have a ton of expendable assets moving forward. And we're talking about not just the need to add one top six forward, but realistically 2 or 3 over the next year or two for them to get to the point where they're a legit contender. Like, this would have been, again, the kind of move that if it hits, you get disproportionate upside relative to what you gave up. And the Canucks need a sort of win like that. They need their own version of like the original JT Miller trade, their own version of the Sam Reinhart trade, or the Sam Bennett trade, where you acquire a player that maybe hasn't fully hit their potential. You give up something for that guy, but not a whole lot, and it, like, that type of trade ends up looking like a steal in hindsight. That's the kind of upside a Zegras trade would have had. Again, no guarantee. This may not work out for the Philadelphia Flyers, right? There are legit reasons why it may not, and he may not stick at center. He may not get back to being a 60-point guy for sure, but the risk to reward ratio makes a lot of sense. And would have made sense for a team in the Canucks position where, again, they don't have a lot of pieces readily available to give up.
The really interesting thing is that the Canucks have been great with their value signings. Like, they've been great at signing guys and then getting more out of those guys than their previous teams got. Where they haven't really done that much is on the trade market yet. They haven't really traded for a guy who excels in Vancouver. And that's the type of trade, like you just said, that's the type of trade that they're looking to make. I lean toward yes, with an asterisk. And the asterisk I'm going to bring up is that Trevor Zegras can't be the best trade or the best player that you bring in all offseason. And at this juncture, it's looking like it's going to be pretty damn difficult for the Canucks to make these 2 or 3 trades that we're talking about, where it's like, okay, you need to go get Marco Rossi, you need to go get Trevor Zegras, you need to go whatever, right? It's looking like it's going to be pretty difficult for them to do that. So if your offseason looks like Pia Suter re-signing and Trevor Zegras, and I don't know, like, I don't even want to come up with a name off the top of my head, but like a third forward who's worse than those 2 guys that I just brought up, I'm sorry, but you're looking at that and you're not holding that promise. I don't want to say it was a promise, but you're not improving the team the way that you kind of alluded to you were going to at your end of season media avails. And like, that's what Jim Rutherford did, right? Was he talked about, we're going to have most of our work done before free agency. We'll see what's left over in free agency. And of course, they can't be faulted for the fact that a changing NHL trade market has kind of changed their plans a bit. Obviously, the Abbostford Canucks are still playing. That makes it a little difficult to go ahead and make trades right now. But if you're looking at this offseason through the lens of like, yeah, okay, they're going to need to get 2 or 3 really solid guys, or they need to get 1 really good player and then 2 guys after that. If you're looking at it through that lens, that's going to be difficult to do at this juncture. So I ask you this, Harm, I want to do like a sub poll question, because I say, yes, they can, if they got Trevor Zegras, they should have done it at that price, for the simple reason of that price leaves your first round pick available. That price leaves blue chip prospects available. You can go make a Marco Rossi trade after trading for Trevor Zegras. You can go make a Marco Rossi trade after trading for Mason Marchment. So I ask this, and I ask this to Canucks fans that are watching this. Would you be happy with the Canucks offseason? And this is a hypothetical since 2 of these players have already been traded. Would you have been happy if the Canucks trade for Marco Rossi, and that's their big trade, okay? Or they trade for JJ Peterka, and that's their big trade. They go into that top tier. That's their big trade. And then they go get Trevor Zegras or Mason Marchment, and then they re-sign Pia Suter. Would you be happy if that's the 3 players we're talking about? Sub-poll question. I'd say it's going to be similar to these results where it's mixed. I think there's going to be a good amount of people that say yes and a good amount that say no. But my broader point is just that you make the Zegras trade if you're the Canucks, because it keeps your first round pick and it keeps that flexibility to do what you're out to do. And that is going to get 2 or 3 solid players that can upgrade your forward group. Because I think Trevor Zegras is an upgrade on basically almost everyone in the Canucks forward core right now, right? And I think that's a solid offseason. You go get Rossi, you go get, and not even Zegras, Marchment, pick Marchment instead, okay? And that Marchment cost even less than Zegras did. If you go get Rossi and you go get Marchment or Zegras, and then you re-sign Pius Suter, like, I don't think anyone's looking at that and saying, oh, what an awful failure of an offseason. These guys didn't even try. No, that's a team taking swings. And I think that's what you want to see is them take some swings here.
And honestly, considering how much of a seller's market it is and how competitive it is to go and buy guys, that kind of hypothetical where Rossi, Marchment, and obviously he's not available anymore, and re-signing Suter potentially, that's a really good outcome considering where the market is at.
It's realistic. Like, it's realistic. It could have been done. It could have been done.
And I should also clarify, when I say I probably would have pulled the trigger on the Zegras trade, I'm not going to sit here and rip or criticize the Canucks for not doing it until I see what they do instead, right? Because it's, all right, you missed out on that opportunity. You decided not to enter those conversations. All right, that's fine. Now let's see what the alternative option that you guys preferred is, right? And if it's Rossi, great. That was, I think, my big take is I was on, I think, Drance's show last week maybe, and he said, is there like one target you have in mind? And sure, like Peterka would have been perfect, but in terms of a more, like, if they get JJ Peterka, that's amazing, but I'm going to assume for now that he's unattainable for the Canucks, just assets wise and what the Sabres want. But sort of, if I'm more realistic about targets, I wanted to see them swing at one of Rossi or Zegras. So it's all right. Zegras is off the board. Rossi's still there. And we know the Canucks have been pushing at him. So this may just be a case where, all right, they looked at both of those guys and went, we'd rather pay for Rossi. He's our target. He's our guy. And if they go out and trade for Rossi for a reasonable price, I'm not going to look back at Zegras then and say, oh, well, why didn't they go trade for Trevor Zegras? Because they still sort of accomplish that overall goal of acquiring a player below the age of 25 years old who still has upside and can be a top six center.
I'm going to give you a take. Jacob, you could write this one in pencil. The NHL trade market is starting to reflect the Vancouver housing market. Prices are high, right? You're asking high prices, but the buyers aren't bucking up. So yeah, it's great that the Sabres want a lot for JJ Peterka, but last I checked, it's June 23rd, and they still haven't traded JJ Peterka. And if they have to get this done, if they're gonna make it happen, I'm gonna give you this take, Harm. JJ Peterka, write this down. This is the part you write down, Jacob. JJ Peterka is going to be traded for less than we think. When we see that trade, we're going to both go, whoa, okay, I thought it would have cost more. Because I think that's the reaction we've had with Marchment, and I think it's the reaction we've had with Zegras as well.
Yeah, but Peterka's a completely different tier of player. We're talking about a guy coming off a 68-point season, 23 years old.
Sure. But it's so competitive that you're waiting for a team to do it, and if no one does it, then at some point you're going to have to.
I think it's a little bit early to look at the lack of activity on the Peterka front and draw the conclusion that, they just set the price too high and no one's meeting it.
Yeah.
The draft is on Friday, so the Sabres still have a lot of time here, and I wouldn't be too quick to say that, all right, the asking price is too high. And hey, if that scenario unfolds where Peterka goes for less than we imagined, then I think the reaction you and I are going to have is, well, why did the Canucks go and get him then?
Absolutely. Write it down, Jacob. Write it down.
It's written down.
Attaboy. Fill out your response for the Family Feud survey. I really want to make sure we get those responses in. It's going to be a really busy week, folks. We're going to have Dave Hall on. Hopefully, we're going to have Stephen Ellis as well. He's really busy this week. Dave Hall's going to come talk Abby with us. He's going to come talk draft with us. We could probably do an entire episode with Dave just tomorrow. So I think we will probably have Dave either tomorrow or Thursday. I don't know. I got to text him. We'll figure it out. But we're going to have Dave Hall on. We're going to do a draft show. We're going to do stuff with Stephen Ellis as well. And Thursday, we're going to play Family Feud. So fill out the Family Feud survey. If you're new here, because we do have some new people, actually, I want to point that out as well. Shout out to all the new Canucks Convo listeners. We play Family Feud Fast Money every Thursday here on the show. We ask 100 Canucks Convo listeners to fill out the survey. And then usually me and Harmon, and now we've kind of switched where I'm hosting and making the surveys. Jacob, our producer, and Harmon are going to answer and try to reach 200 points. So fill out that survey. It's a good one this week. It's a really, really good survey. And it's gonna be way tougher than last week, but it's gonna be fun. It's gonna be really, really fun. All right, let's get to anyone else, which is brought to you by the Vancouver Canadians, who are back at the Nat with a long homestand. 9 games in 10 days. They got a game tomorrow, Tuesday the 24th. Fireworks on Thursday the 26th. A nooner at the Nat on the 27th. Marvel Superhero Day on the 28th. And Celebrate Canada Day on July 1st with a 1:05 p.m. first pitch and bucket hat giveaway. The Nat is going to be rocking this week. For tickets, call 604-872-5232 or check out canadiansbaseball.com. Okay, I want to make sure that that everybody knows we're going to be doing a free agency show. It's going to be very fluid, as it usually is on free agency. So we don't know when Alvin's going to speak. We don't really know what's going to happen on free agency, but we will definitely have a lot of free agency coverage, and I want to make sure people know that. Like I said, also Daily Face-Off Live. I've told you this before. Tyler Yaremchuk's going to be hosting that. There's going to be a really solid panel. You might see me. You might see Jeff Patterson on that show as well. July 1st, 8 a.m. We're going live 8 a.m. Pacific. Make sure you're tuned in for that. Jacob, am I seeing in the chat that you don't have the right link in the...
Yeah, it's being fixed now.
Did you get it done?
Yes,
I just saw your message that you needed me to get it. So
I figured it. I figured it out on my own. We're good.
How that happens so often, hey? Where you like, hey Quads, I need your help, and then I don't reply, and you're like, okay, I figured it out.
Yeah, that's kind of how it goes, huh?
I just like to see you thrive, buddy. Okay, like I was saying, this free agency show, make sure you're watching July 1st. It's going to be a really, really good time, and we're going to have a show as well on free agency Tuesday, July 1st. Harmon, we're going to be ready for emergency episodes this week. Just your vibes take to kick off anyone else. When do the Canucks make their next trade? I say it doesn't happen. I say it doesn't happen until after the Calder Cup Finals done. And I've been saying it for a while, which is why I really wanted it to end. And I hope it ends again tonight. I really hope it ends tonight so the first trade comes down tomorrow.
I was saying midweek, anywhere between kind of Tuesday to Thursday. And of course, the draft is Friday, so that's kind of a soft, I shouldn't even say soft deadline. That's a deadline, at least as far as the 15th overall pick is concerned, if you're going to move it for immediate help. But yeah, midweek, Wednesday, Thursday is kind of what I've been leaning toward, and we'll see if they're able to make something happen. Okay,
this isn't anyone else from Karn in the chat. How high should they be willing to go for Nikolai Ehlers, who's expected to hit the open market? Big Hockey said 9.5 mil. I don't know what my answer to that is, because it kind of depends what you have left over after you make these trades. I think they really like Marco Rossi. Here's one for you, Harm, and you answer both questions. The highest they should be willing to go for Ehlers, but if they go for Ehlers, they're not getting Marco Rossi. So I ask you this: would you rather have Marco Rossi or Nikolai Ehlers? Obviously, keeping in mind that it's not going to cost you assets to go out and get Nikolai Ehlers.
Ehlers is a better player than Rossi. Unquestionably, he creates more on his own. He's so dynamic off the rush. And the interesting thing with Ehlers too is he's an older player relative to Rossi. He's 29 years old, but he may have untapped upside because in Winnipeg, it's really interesting. He's really consistently been a 15-ish minute player, ice time wise. He's not really ever averaged first line minutes. This year, for example, 1548. The year before that, 1552, 1539 the year before that. So you look at his production this year, for example, in 63 points in 69 games. The year before, 61 points in 82 games. Yeah, he hasn't ever really been, let's say, an 80-point guy, but it wouldn't surprise me if he can put up 75 points or something like that if he stays healthy and if he gets closer to the 18, 19-minute range in terms of ice time and consistent power play one opportunity. There was only one season when he averaged more than that. That was the 2021-22 campaign where he averaged 1804. And that year in 62 games, he scored 28 goals and 55 points. So that's closer to the production level you could get from him. I think that's important to keep in mind as we discuss, all right, what is Ehlers actually worth? Because I think he's more than just a 60-point guy moving forward. Plus, he's a dynamic play driver, can make plays on his own, isn't relying on others to drive the offense. I was looking at Dom Luszczyszyn's model. On a long-term deal, he projects that Ehlers would be worth just over $8 million. Look, in free agency, you're going to have to overpay for talent. I'd be willing to stretch into the nine-ish million range. Maybe a tad higher, but if it gets a 10 million, then all right, that's probably too expensive for what he is as a player, especially because he hasn't always been the most durable guy. But yeah, around that $9 million range is kind of what I'd be offering.
This one from Walk in the chat. He said, Garland, should they re-sign him, extension eligible on July 1st, or trade him? I lean towards trade because he'll never be a top 6 winger, and the contract is going to be too heavy for a middle 6 winger. I'm thinking, like, I'm going to be honest with you. I know that the middle class is getting paid right now. I don't know what trade value Connor Garland has. I don't know if he has super high trade value right now. Like, I don't want to sit here and make a sweeping claim like I don't think Garland has surplus value, but let's also not forget that, like, when Connor Garland requested a trade from Vancouver, right? How long ago was that? It was the start of 23-24, or was it a year before that?
I think it was started 2023-24.
Okay.
Although he did shoot it down himself, but
no, he didn't.
Elliot's reporting.
No, he didn't. He didn't shoot it down. No, he didn't.
He did in the aftermath.
Did he in the aftermath? Because all I remember on the day
I think he did.
was him getting pressed about it.
Yeah, no, I'm not referring to that. I'm not referring to that.
Okay.
That was pure semantics.
Yeah, that was like, yeah, it's my age. It's like, what? Anyways, I'm not going to go down that road. But my point being is just that when the Canucks were trying to trade him, whether it was because Garland requested it or not, okay, they were working. They were like, the agent was involved too, and it was not possible. Like they were trying to trade Connor Garland and they couldn't do it. So I that's all I'm saying is I'm leaning back on that and saying I don't know how much trade value Connor Garland has. Now, has that changed because the middle class of the NHL is starting to get paid a lot more? Maybe, but this idea that you have this option of, trade him for surplus value or re-sign him, I don't know if they necessarily have that option, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I totally get what you mean, especially free agent at the end of next season, so it's only 1 year of team control. Plus, just in general, a small sort of non-elite middle lineup forward is as good as I think Garland is. I think he's better and more valuable to the Canucks than he is as a trade chip. I think he's the kind of player that teams would undervalue and
exactly
underrate. So that's why I'm not sort of banging the table as far as trading Connor Garland. But you have to explore what would an extension cost.
Yep.
How reasonable does that look? And if his next extension is going to be too expensive, then you may lean toward like this team's asset poor.
Yeah.
And we've talked about, this is a small forward group. Well, then that would kind of, you kind of kill two birds with one stone there by leveraging Garland as a trade chip if you're unable to come to terms with him on a reasonable extension. Yeah, it just all kind of depends on the contract price. I like Garland as a player, and I honestly would not be opposed to keeping him long term. I think he's one of those players that in an ideal situation is probably an elite third liner rather than a sort of full-time top 6 player on a contending team. But having said that, there's a reason why the Canucks had one of the best third lines in the NHL in 2023-24. And I'm going to be honest with you, it wasn't because of Dakota Joshua and Teddy Bluger. Garland was the real driver of that line. He made those guys so much better. And it's not just, all right, he can give you 50 points. He is legitimately high-end defensively. His play driving metrics at 5-on-5 have always been stellar. He produces the bulk of his points at even strength. And he proved in the playoffs that his size isn't really a hindrance, that he's still effective. So I would lean towards trying to extend Garland if I'm being honest.
I think that's what they'll do too. I think they'll try to extend Garland. Speaking of which, there's a bunch of reporting about Pius Suter. The Canucks circling back to Pius Suter. The Canucks making a run at Pius Suter. I believe Elliot Friedman said it today on Donnie and Dolly that the Canucks are going to take another run at Pius Suter. Oh, and he also said they're going to try. I should have done some prep. He also said that they're going to try to extend Connor Garland. So my inkling was right, that they're going to try to extend Connor Garland if they re-sign Pius Suter. Harm, do you kind of view this as if it's under $5 million based on what everyone else is getting paid, so be it? Like, I look at it and say there's going to be a lot of flawed players. And in terms of players who have flaws, if Pius Suter's biggest flaw is his foot speed, and he's shown that he can kind of overcome that with how smart of a player he is, dude kills penalties, plays center for you, can play the wing in a high-end role. We've sang the praises of Pius Suter. I am absolutely fine with Pius Suter at $4.5 million. Absolutely fine with it.
It's a tad expensive. I think he could live up to that contract, but it's not so much that, I don't like Pius Suter at $4.5 million more than it is the Canucks only have a precious amount of cap space. And when you're committing to Suter, to me, it's a sign that you don't think you can do a whole lot better. And to me, the Canucks need to do a whole lot better if they're going to get back to actually being a contending team. Now, maybe they can't. Do a whole lot
better? Like, look at this market. That's what I'm saying. Like, circle back to Pius Suter, I think screams, we went out to get some guys, realized how damn expensive it was going to be and how it wasn't going to work. I don't know.
Sure, it might not be. It might be an all right salvage situation. It's not so much that I would be sitting here saying, I hate this contract for the Canucks.
Sure.
It'd more be, wow, the Canucks are in a rough spot as far as we know they need true high-end top 6 players to add to this team. Like, they're not going to go anywhere in the playoffs if they don't add, like, I'm not even talking about when we say top 6 too, it's not just that they need more Jake DeBrusk types who can put up 50 points. They need more players who can, like, true top line caliber.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're extending Suter, that tells me, like, it's more concerning from a big picture perspective that you don't think you can go out and attain that higher end caliber of player. And if you're unable to attain that higher end caliber of player, then just big picture, I have question marks about how you're ever going to be a legit Stanley Cup contender.
That's very fair. That's very fair. Okay, is there anyone else in the chat? I brought up Suter. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I don't have anything else. You got anything else?
Don't think. I wanted to quickly add. So I was watching Game 7 of the NBA Finals yesterday. First of all, sucks that Tyrese Halliburton tore his Achilles in Game 7. That's just so heartbreaking. But when the Thunder won, it was so weird where something felt so off. First of all, their celebration, I don't know if you saw the clip of it, was kind of subdued. Like, the reaction was as if they won any normal playoff game where it's like, all right, like, this is an important win, but job's not done, as opposed to, holy crap, we won Game 7 of the NBA Finals. Like, we won a championship. So that was a little bit strange to me. The fact that the reaction was a little bit nonchalant almost. And then even just the whole ceremony, there was just something missing. And I was watching it with my dad, and we're both kind of like, compared to the Stanley Cup, it just didn't have the feeling of a big moment the same way it does when the Stanley Cup is awarded. And they have this sort of stage setup, and I don't know, something about it. The atmosphere wasn't as electric as I thought it'd be in OKC. And there was just something overall about how the Thunder won when, like, I just expected it to feel like way more significant and exciting of a moment. And it just sort of felt flat. And even afterwards, one of the Athletics NBA reporters who was in the locker room said that was one of the most subdued, like, locker room environments after a championship win he's ever seen in any sport.
Now, obviously, I think Stanley Cup's harder to win than the NBA championship. I think hockey's a harder sport to play than basketball. We don't need to get into that, but I think that's why it takes a lot more out of players to win the Stanley Cup than it does the NBA championship. Do you also think it had anything to do with the Halliburton injury? That they were just, like, a little, not down, but like, okay, we're not going to rub this in too much?
Possibly, but I don't think that alone can explain it. Even then, even if you didn't want to rub it in their faces while you're on the court and while you're in the public eye, the fact that even in the locker room it was still kind of subdued shows me that that's kind of just how they were generally feeling. And of course, part of it could be the Halliburton injury, but it's not just the fact that, oh, they didn't react in a big way. Even just the whole like trophy presentation, and you and I both know how I feel about the owner getting the trophy first rather than the players, and how dumb that is.
I love it. I think it should happen. I'm just kidding.
But just something about all of it felt like a letdown. And I say this as a basketball fan. I don't watch a ton of regular season basketball, but I watch the playoffs. And I don't know, for a great series like that, I expected it to just feel like a much bigger, more exciting moment. And I just, as a basketball fan, felt a little let down compared to this is the Stanley Cup final.
Big Hug Hockey with my take in the chat. Basketball is a boring sport. Don't know why it's so popular. I liked basketball. I liked the NBA when I was like 13, 14. I liked that era. Like Derrick Rose was my favorite player. I loved the Bulls. Also, the NBA 2K video games were fire.
Dude, 2K13 was
2K13.
Time.
That was my first
the best
2K
era.
game. That was the first 2K game I ever played. So I had high expectations. I was into the league. Really enjoyed it. I also don't think that it's a coincidence that like my NBA fandom came with like the end of the 2011 Canucks. Like when it started entering the really dark years for the Canucks was when I started to pay more attention to the NBA. And obviously now I just watch baseball and obviously hockey as well. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know. It's interesting. It's interesting for sure. Cause I saw a lot of people talking about that today. I think it's just cause the trophy's so damn easy to win that they were just like, whatever. I want to go home. It's like Nikola Jokic. I like that. I like him wanting to go home and race his horses. That's awesome.
That was a different vibe though, because OKC, no one had that Jokic kind of mindset and personality. I will say the Thunder are a likable group. They're so humble. When SGA won the finals MVP, he brought Jalen Williams and made him hoist it with him after, and it was sort of like this is a co-MVP thing, even though SGA was, I mean, Williams was unbelievable too. But the point being, like, those guys genuinely root for one another in a way that is so wholesome and is more rare in professional sports than you would think. And my biggest takeaway was what we saw from the Thunder and also the Florida Panthers. It's also a reminder that, yeah, talent is always most important. Always, always, always. Locker room chemistry and culture can never be more important than talent. But you need both to win a championship. And all I could think of when you see SGA sort of winning that chip that way and the Finals MVP and sharing it with he literally passed around the Finals MVP. And I'm not talking about the actual the championship trophy, the Finals MVP. He passed that around with all of his teammates as sort of like we won this together. Just the MVP, right? Like that just kind of goes to show. You contrast it with the Canucks, where JT Miller and Elias Pettersson couldn't even get along, and it's like there's a lesson there to be learned when you look at the Thunder and then the Panthers as well, how tight knit a group they are. It's always talent first, but also the locker room chemistry and genuinely rooting for one another and having that bond where you feel like brothers and like a family. That's an important ingredient for success as well.
Speaking of greatness, success in sports, your pickleball championship. Do you have any comment? I saw this on your Instagram story over the weekend, talking about what it takes to win. And look, dude, I'm not gonna lie, the respect level now. When you talk hockey, I'm gonna start listening now because now you know what it takes to win. You're officially a champion. Do you have anything you'd like to say?
Rec League champ. I know what it takes to win at every level
Of any sport.
I have more cups than Connor McDavid at this point. I think if Connor wants an opportunity to join a championship winning team to have the best possible shot at winning a trophy, he knows who to call right now, and he only has one more opportunity because it's not going to be long before they put me in the Hall of Fame and I retire.
Love it. Couldn't have said it better myself. Let's get to our Bet365. Bet of the day brought to you by Bet365. Baseball bets keep hitting, folks. I'm just crushing these baseball bets. What do we got today? Okay. I like this. We have got, I think I just kicked my camera. Did I? Oh no, we're good. Okay. Okay, we've got the New York Mets taking on the Atlanta Braves. Now, I told you about this player before. You've probably never heard of this player before, but I call him Paulie Punchouts. His name is Paul Blackburn. He is going to pitch tonight for the New York Mets. You can get Paul Blackburn over on strikeouts, 3.5. He needs 3.5 or more strikeouts at plus 115 odds against the Atlanta Braves. I am taking that Paulie Punchouts to record 4 punchouts over at Bet365. You can get that. Whatever your bet is, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Download the app and get it on the game. Use the code NATION at Bet365. Must be 19 plus to play. If you choose to play, please play responsibly. All right.
One more thing I'll mention. Obviously, the Abbotsford Canucks get going here in about 54 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
If you have the Bet365, well, yes, Family Feud, but if you have the Bet365 app, you can actually watch the game on the app. You go in, you don't actually have to place a bet, but if you go in and scroll through, you got to find the American Hockey League. There's a search bar, but if you go in, click on the actual game lines, and it brings up the expanded page where you have all the different lines and bets you can make. If it's working properly, it'll actually have a stream of the game right in there, and you don't have to pay for it. So just a little hack for anyone trying to watch the game tonight.
Beauty. Love it. Good beat. Like that, Jacob. All right. We'll see you all tomorrow, folks. For my co-host, Harmon Dow, and our technical producer, Jacob Lazar. My name is Dave Vergelli. Thanks so much for an episode of Canucks Conversation.
Canucks Conversation is live Monday through Friday, every weekday at 2 p.m. over on the Canucks Army YouTube channel. Make sure you like, subscribe, and interact in the YouTube live chat every day.